What are we to make of these so-called ghost ships or spy ships?
Oh, well, there's a lot of them. I mean, the Russians have been doing this for years. They have ships which they say are survey ships and fishing boats, and normally they're festooned with aerials. And interestingly, they never make much pretense of actually fishing. They don't even try to pretend that they're fishing, but they patrol around. And these sorts of things that have been spotted in the Baltic now look as if they're mapping the wind farms, the offshore wind farm facilities, because obviously if modern societies are going to take a fair proportion of their power, their electricity generation from wind farms in the future, then they're vulnerable. And they could be put out of action, they could be destroyed, they could be sabotaged. And we know that the Russians have already got up to a fair bit of sabotage in the Baltic Sea. So these are credible threats. And the ships that operate up and down off the British coast, they carefully sort of position themselves. But what worries the British, and this goes back to 2017, the Chief of the Defence Staff then said in December 2017, we are very worried about undersea cables, because a lot of the undersea cables that run the internet come in at Land's End, across the Atlantic. It's Land's End is where they make landfall, in effect. And those cables are in our area. And we worry quite a lot about the ability to interfere with those cables, destroy them, or even, plug into them and draw stuff off them.
And what about this cyber threat more broadly? How significant is that?
Well, again, it's been there for a long time. But what Oliver Dowden was doing today, I think, is recording the fact that the cyber threat is now general. That what look like ransomware attacks, what look like criminal group attacks, actually have got a lot of political motivations behind them. And that happened in the NotPetya attack in 2016. It looked like a ransomware attack, but actually it was an attack on the whole of the Ukrainian government, and it affected about 80 other countries, including our own. Did about $10 billion worth of damage. So what they're saying is these attacks are increasing, and they are attacking, or potentially can attack, Britain's critical national infrastructure. And that's the target in the sort of war that the Russians are fighting now against the rest of us. If they can attack the critical national infrastructure, they can give the government something else to worry about rather than
Which is what exactly?
Ukraine.
Which is critical national infrastructure. I mean,
yeah,
what
it's
does
a great phrase, isn't it? Everybody says, oh, critical national infrastructure. What is it? Well, it is defined by the British government as 13 sectors. This is the British government's list. And that's arranged alphabetically, so chemical, civil, nuclear at the top, and transport, space and water further down. And we've coloured in there, in light blue, those are the areas of these 13 sectors in which the government has complete control over defence, emergency services and government itself. And in the dark blue, they have heavy involvement in health and space. But in all of the other sectors, chemical, civil, nuclear, water, food, transport, that's all private industry. It's all private sector. And a lot of that private ownership, of course, is in foreign hands. And so protecting the British national infrastructure in these sectors depends not just on what the government does, but what the government can persuade private investors and private boards run by private investors to do. Effectively, to spend a great deal more money on cybersecurity and to get on board with a national resilience programme. We have a resilience framework, which came out at the end of last year, and this resilience framework aims to make the whole of the UK much more resilient against, amongst other things, organised cyber attack.